Might be a couple of latecomers, but I think we'll make a start. Just gone 7. So yeah, there's not much more to be said that hasn't already been said, but other than that, we're really thrilled to be joined this evening by one half of Tatty, Devine. It's a brilliant exhibition. I hope you've really all enjoyed it. Please come back throughout the time that it's running. It's on until the 13th of November, and please do invite your friends and family, bring them along too. But for now, yeah, let's give a really warm welcome to Harry and Devine. Thank you.
Timer down there, so hopefully I'll try and keep it to 45 minutes. I wanted to start by saying thank you to T Power for having us, because it's so lovely to be in this space, and the synergy between our work and this space is off the charts. I think it's a really lovely space to see it in. I think it's actually its best incarnation yet, I would say, even compared to when we first did it, which was the most exciting one, obviously. But I just love the idea of this space. I didn't know much about it before, but it's great, and I wish I'd had something like this when I was younger. And also thank you to the Crafts Council, because without the Crafts Council this would never have happened, and it's completely down to them and lovely David there who suggested it, that they do it. I think it was the first exhibition that they gave to a single maker in the last 15 years or something like that. Lots of group shows with the Crafts Council, so it's a real privilege to be accoladed to such a level by the Crafts Council, who are great. Thank you very much. And I'd like to send my apologies, send Rosie's apologies for not being here tonight. In lockdown, she moved to the Isle of Wight, and we are top and tailing this exhibition. So I'm going to be doing the talk tonight and the workshop tomorrow, and then Rosie's going to come up and do business advice with other market traders. So do come back and meet Rosie too, because kind of like I'll tell you more about it, I guess. But kind of our relationship is that I'm kind of like create things. So I make things, I draw things. We both met at art school, but she makes things happen. So she's like the business end, as it were. So she'll be really good at that. I've got a little clicker here. So I've got loads and loads and loads of slides. So none of them I'll just bang through it quite quickly, I'm sure. But really they're more a chance to just tell stories, essentially. And that's what the jury does, I hope. And over the last 20 years, there's been thousands of stories, and there's thousands of pieces of jewellery. So we'll start somewhere at the beginning, which is kind of when Rosie and I met. So this is Rosie and me hiding there in that red cardigan that I really wish I still had. When we met at Chelsea School of Art, which was such a light bulb moment for me and for Rosie. It's when I found my people. You know, when you don't know you know who you are, but you don't know anybody else who's like you until you get to somewhere like Chelsea, and you find Rosie and you find your friends, basically, and they allow you to become who you are. And then you have loads of fun. And so basically, from Chelsea to today, predominantly, we've just had fun after fun after fun. We didn't mean to start a business. We didn't mean to get MBEs. We didn't mean to employ 30 people. None of that stuff was on purpose. That just happened because we were complete control freaks and work junkies. but we also had loads of fun. So we had this really strong work ethic. So if we wanted something doing, we would do it. And we still do that now. It's like about making things happen. And I'm an advocate of never watching people have fun. I want to be having it. So if I go to a gig, I'm not going to stand at the back. I want to be at the front, or I always want to be where the separate attention is, basically. So then we started Tatty Devine. So we went to art school, which kind of gave us. This is Chelsea. This is Henry Moore Sculptures. It was outside Chelsea on King's Road at the time. And going to art school was so. I always knew I wanted to go to art school. It wasn't an if or a but. It was always going to go to art school. There was no permission sought. It was like I just did it. And it gave us a different way of looking at the world, and actually a fantastic education, even though they didn't teach us anything. But that's not true. But they gave us, it was the first time I'd ever been in a situation where I could do what I wanted, and that was more important than I'd been set a brief. Or, you know, like you have to do A-level art, or you have to respond to something. There was no response. It was like, what do you want? And then that was in itself the hardest thing I'd ever done, essentially, which was, and then I kept doing it forever. Because there's kind of like this sort of fear in doing whatever you want. And when we left college, I've always done that ever since. I've never had a proper job. So then Rosie and I, when we left college, we moved to East London. My mum said to me, "Oh, Harriet, you've got a degree, you're going to get a lovely job because you've got a degree." And I said, "No, Mum, I'm moving to East London, I'm going to go on a dole and I'm going to go to private use and drink wine. That's my career path of choice. I'm an artist, and that is what we do to get forth in the world. And luckily for me, she didn't say no. She just went slightly ashen and just, I knew she didn't have a choice. It wasn't anything to do with her. Bless her. She was there, when we got the shop, she was there sweeping out the rubbish from the building, and my dad was there painting it with us, you know. They were always very, very supportive. I was very lucky. So when Rosie and I were like magpies throughout the whole of college, so Rosie worked in a vintage shop, and we were always in charity shops and boot fairs. A, because we didn't have any money, but B, because it was cool, you know. It was just like it still is now to an extent, but it was that kind of idea that old junk was treasure. So, and like we were obsessed with old stuff, junky stuff, French stuff, plastic stuff, old key rings, anything we could get our hands on from charity shops, old records. Everything. It was like the 90s, so everything in the 70s was really cool, just like everything at the millennium is really cool now. So it's like a 20-year cycle of like recycling everything, but you could find really cool old stuff in charity shops then, because the stuff in the charity shops in the 90s was from the 70s, which was really old. And this is the vintage shop that Rosie worked in while we were at college, which was just across the road from college. This shop isn't here anymore, and it was a mecca in London of really very beautiful vintage clothing. So Rosie learned so much about proper vintage clothing. They had like Dior, Chanel, like real old couture in this shop. It was incredible, and all the girls that worked in there all knew everything about it, and they all looked like they worked in this shop. It was kind of a fantastic place. I was really jealous that we had this job. Although I had a great job too at the Camden Arts Centre, completely different, but it was. We were always working essentially, and actually, this is a different story, hang on, I'll go back to that. There's so many stories to tell. But in this shop was when a stylist first came into this shop, and they would come in all the time from Vogue, from different magazines, and Rosie was working there, and she was wearing something that we'd found at a boot fair and like taken apart. It was like upcycling in its very first incarnation, essentially. We were cutting up old jeans, turning them into skirts, and cutting off the legs of jeans and twisting them round before Levi's did that. You know, just everything we could do just to change everything up a bit. So she was wearing this thing we'd made on her head. And the woman came in and went, oh, I really like whatever that is. And Rosie didn't say I found it at a boot fair and I sewed some ribbons onto it. She said, my company make it, which is very, very, very insightful of her. And then the woman happened to be from Vogue, and then the woman said, why don't you come and bring your collection to Vogue House on Monday for a shoot that we're doing. And Rosie said, yeah, cool, I'll bring the collection on Monday, no problem. So she got straight on the phone to me, Harriet, we have an appointment at Vogue on Monday to show them the collection. This is on Friday night. And I was like, but Rosie, what collection? We don't have a collection. It's not a thing that we have. But nevertheless, that weekend, I SOS'd my mum's sewing machine. It came to Brick Lane, and we made a collection over the weekend. But we did not go out on Friday night. We still went out Friday night, and then made a collection, and took it to Vogue on Monday. And this is us doing a selfie with a real camera. I don't know how we did that, but this is like a real moment in time, and we managed to capture it without mobile phones. And so this is how we rocked into Vogue. Me in this old t-shirt I bought in Greece on holiday with a bunch of stuff we locked up over the weekend, out with my mum's sewing machine and my cutting board. It was just like, yeah, we'll make that happen. We'll go. So it just happened to be that shoot was a Mario Testino shoot for the Millennium issue of Vogue, and that's Erin O'Connor wearing some of the first things that we made. So at the very beginning, we didn't make anything with a laser cutter. Didn't know what a laser cutter was. Didn't know what a jump ring was, didn't know how to make jewellery. We'd done painting. I knew how to make things because my mum was a couture dressmaker and my dad was kind of a carpenter stroke engineer in a funny kind of way. So I've always known how to make all sorts of stuff. It just naturally, if I can think of it, I can make it, not a problem. So we were making things out of leather because when Rosie and I were at college, one night we fell out of the bar at college, which was a bit of a hazard of ours, and I went on my way home. I found 18 bin bags full of leather sample books from an upholsterer's shop. And having been at art school, you get trained to pick up anything cool on the streets because there was no eBay and there was no the internet. So people used to throw stuff away, get all kinds of cool stuff, furniture, everything was just left out on the street. So all these leather sample books were just like, that's treasure. So me and my flatmate carried it all into my flat. And I just stored it under the bed and then dutifully wrote my dissertation, finished my degree, while this stuff just pulsed under my bed, all these materials. And at the time, I was wearing a bit of old belt around my wrist, held together with a hair slide, because it was the 90s, so we thought that the 80s were really cool. So it was kind of like a homage to Morton Harket kind of vibe. And then when we left college, all this leather, I cut some up into strips, and me and my dad invented this very simple way of making it little arrowheads, so you could just put it through a slot. So you could just get it to stay on with this little arrowheads, and we didn't need any tools apart from a Stanley knife. There was no like, this one's got bibbles. This is another story where my mum rang the local radio station and said, my daughter's making things out of leather, can anyone help us? Because we've got no terminology and we don't know where to buy things for leather work. And a saddle maker called into the radio show that she got called out on. We went to go and see a saddle maker, and he explains these Sam Brown, that's their real name, Sam Brown studs, which we referred to as bibbles, which gave us a way of actually attaching the leather properly. So it was like so many little incremental steps that kind of led us to make these things that you could attach to yourself. Because Rose and I would just go out all the time. This is us in Vogue. We were just out all the time, but we would make these outfits for a single night. It's like that kind of thing where you go through charity shops and you really love ornaments or the stuff that you put in your room, and now you would put it on Instagram and it would be called a shelfie. Whereas we didn't have that, so we used to just wear it. So I used to make necklaces out of like macrame owls, and I would make badges out of toy animals, or I'd sew a whole herd of toy sheep onto like a green top, and then Rosie would wear that out, or I'd sew her into something that we'd found. And then we would go out and ruin it essentially, and it would come back covered in the mud off the floor of the dance floor, which is always fun. So this is us in our window of our shop. So our shop is another story. So when we first, you could probably come to a slide of the studio. Hang on, we'll do this fake first. I have to remember the order of the slides. So we started to make things, basically. We weren't making laser cut things. We were making leather things. We were making things like this leather rackle bag, and because we were in the East End, so the whole of the East End, geographically speaking, at that time, we were on our doorsteps were leather merchants, basically. So we could find leather, and we could find little factories that made belts and things like that. So we were buying leather and we were sewing it up into that, and actually we sold this to a shop in Paris. This is another story. I will divert off into all these little stories which won't make chronological sense. But that bag, the shop in Paris, took stock to that, and then they rang us very excited. Karl Lagerfeld just brought your bag, and then lo and behold, Chanel made one of them. But no, that's another story. So this is really fun, and I was reading this on the train tonight here, and I'm just reading all the people mentioned in here, and mentioning the fact that we had a band, and it's like, and I was saying to Rosie, I wish that band had ever actually played. We had one band practice, and then the fact that our band was called Messy Beautiful was because a magazine in Japan had translated Tatty Devine into Messy Beautiful, and that's how we got our band name, which we really practiced once, and I can't play instruments, so but never mind. I would love to be in a band. But Carano and the Georgina Starr and Peaches and all those people that were just so like of the time, it was really fun. So we had like a quite long-standing relationship with Vogue at the beginning. They were like they were real supporters of our work. Essentially, we did loads of stuff with Nick Knight after that Testino shoot. Nick Knight would ring us and say, "I'm doing this shoot, blah blah blah. Can you make us this camel jewellery, or can you make me a giant raccoon tail made out of fluorescent leather?" And we were just yes girls. We would just say, yeah, we can make that. We had anything else to do, So we were just making kind of whatever. We were like a make whatever Vogue want factory, just like, it was great. But then we kept sending back bikes, and bikes used to come up and pick stuff for Vogue, and it got to the point where they must have had loads of stuff in their like magic Vogue cupboard, because this is Cindy Sherman, and Cindy Sherman was invited to go and take a series of photographs of whilst raiding the Vogue closet. So she did this collaboration with Vogue, and she made this image, and all of those belts that she's wearing, keyboard belts for our belts, that's why in there there's the timelines on the keyboard. So coming from an art school background and then getting to sort of surreptitiously collaborate, I'm going to use that word loosely here, with Cindy Sherman was like amazing. And then another story, went to Tokyo, and then this image was as tall as this room in Dover Street Market. It was just like, it was a proud moment. a magical moment. Like the whole last 20-something years now have just been full of like little spots of magic. But even all the Vogue glamour, as it were, and it sounds glamorous, this is the reality. You know, this is me in my bedroom making belts. You know, because actually it was crazy. We got into London Fashion Week by accident because we'd gone to the Fashion Week for fun when we were at university, when we were at college. Like we had like black photographers passes from our friend who was from Hong Kong, who would pretend to give us a business card, so we worked for this Hong Kong magazine, and we would go to parties and get into the photographer's pit and be involved because it felt easy. Fashion felt kind of easy compared to the lectures and the kind of the. It's because like college was quite high. You know, the philosophical content of college was quite high in terms of modern art and the level of tutors we had at Chelsea. It was off the charts, really. It's great. So fashion felt kind of gentle, but it really wasn't. It was full on, you know. But eventually, we accidentally got to London Fashion Week because we'd been involved in Fashion Week in a kind of fun capacity. So we thought we were doing London Fashion Week, and then we got all of these orders. So this was like we accidentally got an order from Saks Fifth Avenue, like for 72 shops across America. We had no production facilities, nothing at all. We had our friends who were mostly like boys who had made pop videos, and we had to train them how to stitch by hand. There's probably like 30 individual crystals on this belt, and they all had to be sewed on. We had to glue them on, and then you'd sew them on by hand, and you'd back them. So the whole room, just imagine the smell of contact adhesive in this room too. And 4 other boys living in the building, and there's none washing up done for 6 weeks. That is what this photograph is saying. And then like Japanese buyers would knock on the door and ask to do an appointment, but okay, move the knickers off the radiator, kind of thing. But it was fun, do you know what I mean? We were just like, we just did it. It wasn't, it was really good because we had the support of the East London Small Business Centre. So when we got this order in for 72 shops across America and thousands of belts, as soon as we had a signed order, we could take it to them and they would give us the money that would allow us to buy the materials to produce it before we could send the order out, or else we wouldn't have been able to do it essentially. And so this is an example of some of the things we used to make. So this was a huge, great big rainbow piece, and then this like great big heart brooch. It was always bigger and larger than life, essentially. So moving from that tiny room in Brick Lane, we knew that we needed to get a studio space, and we couldn't find a studio space anywhere. We kept getting gazumped. So we were sitting across the road from our Brick Lane shop, having a bagel, and we thought, well, why don't we have a shop? That looks like a space we could be in. And I mean, I'd done seminars at college about artists reappropriating space, and there was all the artists who were running galleries like City Racing. And then just around the corner from our shop, Tracy Emin and Sarah Lucas had a shop called The Birds. So they were a real inspiration. You just open a shop. I mean, we didn't mean to open a shop. We just wanted a studio space. You know, and like behind us it says Tatty, Devine in the window, but written in budgies. There was no like graphics or branding or tills or anything. We didn't have any stuff. We didn't have any money. The shop was an old carpet shop, so it was full of old bits of carpet and horrible old shelving. The toilet had concrete in it, and the basement had a dirt floor and was up to our knees in rubbish. But we just rolled our sleeves up, put it all in the bin, and then painted it white, and we just used to sit on the old tins of paint that we painted it with, basically. And then we would make things out of found objects and sit and look at them, like we had done at college. It was we basically made ourselves a safe space. And because we put things on the walls to look at them, and it looked like a shop from the outside, people would knock on the door and say, can I buy that? And we said yes, and that's why we survived, basically, really. So as we had a point of contact to human beings, because all this time we've been doing the market stall, but there was this really delicate tipping point, which went from doing the market stall on Saturdays and Sundays to, oh, now we're stocked in Saks Fifth Avenue and Harvey Nichols at the same time, and these things we're selling on the market for £5, but if we sell something on the market for £5 and sell it to Harvey Nichols for £5, Harvey Nichols want to sell it for £15. So now we can't sell that for £15 on the market because no one will buy it. What do we do, kind of thing. It was this really, okay, we kind of have to stop doing the market and move over into this other space with loads of wholesale, basically. And so as well as designing jewellery, we were designing kind of systems of working, because we didn't know how to operate a wholesale business, or a manufacturing business. It didn't occur to us that was almost what we were even doing. I didn't even know where shops got their stock from. hadn't occurred to me where shops got their stock from at all. So, like, I guess in a kind of surrealist way, but I don't know, we were making things from found objects because we didn't have any other choice, basically. Everything we liked was a bit weird that way. So we used to find things like old records from cake decorating shops. So then this would be popular, and then we would sell, like, say popular, a shop in Japan might want 6 of them. But then we were like, but we've only got 15 of those little cake decoration things left. And we would have to ring random cake decorating shops in Southampton and Portsmouth and anywhere we could in the yellow pages, because there wasn't the internet. Have you got any small cake decorations that look like records? And they said, yeah, of course, we've got 6 of those. And we would drive there and buy 6 of them to try and fulfill this order. It was kind of completely insane. And then I didn't have a drill, so we were punching these with holes. So there was, you have kind of like, hopefully it's not going to crack when you punch it. I should have drilled it. I know that now, but I didn't know that then. It's like, you forget how much you don't know, essentially. So, I mean, this is, I mean, we've got one, I'm sure, somewhere, but there's not many. You know, it's just like all these things we made with found objects and things where we had to, like, fax people our logo, and then this is their interpretation of our fax logo. Our logo in all its many guises and all these, like, kind of like the development of things. I'm like, oh my god, so now if we're going to get something made, you have to have 200 of something made, and that's like a big investment. But you kind of gradually make these incremental steps towards, like, even in this piece, it's got those D-rings on it. That's because we found, like, a wholesaler that sold findings. And then we did learn Fashion Week. It started to become a proper business, and then we started to generate imagery, which at college I'd never generated photographic imagery. Rosie made things out of, like, sheets of glass, and I did painting. But at the time, the Lomo camera had just kind of been, the people who were doing Lomo had just started to kind of bubble, essentially. And Rosie had been to Russia because her dad had gone and worked there and got an old Lomo camera, and then we found out about cross-processing. So we were making these kind of, like, pre-Instagram filter images from cross-processing slide film just on our friends. So this was like our first lookbook, because when we first did Fashion Week, we didn't just do Fashion Week. We made a film and we published this set of photographs, like holiday photographs, and we had a tea party, and we made a fanzine, and we made a glittery sign out of sequins that looked like one out of the West End, you know, those, like, glittery sequins moving signs. We made one of those until our fingers bled from poking the little nails in by hand on our fingers. I think there's a picture of that, you'll see it. But, so this is my flatmate wearing a necklace made of cars, you know, and this is me and Rosie in Southend, where this bracelet here, this was a feat of engineering, so we managed to find a potter off Brick Lane who worked in an artist commune with about 40 tortoises in the garden in an old school, and he cast this in porcelain for us, and then we had to go and hand carve all the little burrs off them to try and replicate Sweeties. Just like, it was all completely insane. And then, yeah, that's us when we were 12. No, but I mean, we don't look like we were 12, don't we? That's crazy. And then it was obviously really important to have a fax number and let everybody know about it. So, but we couldn't just text people. You couldn't just email anybody. You had to do everything by post. Everything was, like, real. You had to make things. We didn't know how to do anything, so we had to make everything up as we went along on how we did things. So rather than just sending out a letter or a compliment slip saying we got a new fax number, we think we'll make finger puppets of ourselves and send editioned finger puppets of ourselves to the top 50 journalists that we think are important enough to require to know our fax number, which is completely mental. What do they need to know our fax number for? I don't know. So we did this, and then we did it on a black background like this, so we could give ourselves individual haircuts for every single pair of finger puppets. There is some in the show, you'll see them. I think I've got a bouffant in one. And actually that t-shirt's in the show too. I mean, we always think that we're hoarders, so we've got all of these bits of stuff. 20 years ago, we've got the first ever little book we made from the market stall in there, and the first receipt from an order from Whistles, and just this. There was just so many bits of paper to record everything on, and we just kept it all. So when we got the shop, it kind of all started to come together in a way, because you had space, and you could create installations like this. So this was like, like one of our first collections essentially. So we were trying to like find things and source things and generally try and put real collections together now. And then make installations. And actually I was thinking this day, we should do that again. I haven't done that for ages, you know. It's like, because everything kind of like runs kind of a little bit like clockwork now. I make all the jewellery, but it goes to the shop and the girls put it out. But actually, wouldn't it be fun to do this again, you know, just like to make a little scenario. So we just never did anything by halves, basically. So the shop also gave us this incredible community, which I think is at the heart of Tatty Devine, essentially. So all these people in this picture are fundamental to the existence of Tatty Devine. And actually the whole exhibition is all just full of our friends, essentially. So all these people didn't aspire to normal things. So it was like a kind of group of people that were managing to sustain themselves through creative means. And nobody wanted a car, nobody wanted a house, nobody was interested in anything normal. Everybody was just like, it was like a sense of creative capital. So like, Stephen's just done some pictures of men with beards, you're like, oh, that's really cool. Or Mark's just made some more badges that say, I love boot fairs, that's really cool. Or Hervé's just done an illustration for a band for their 7-inch, I don't know, whatever it was. It was like, the currency that we all traded in was creativity. It wasn't money. But you kind of like East London then, we didn't really need money like you do kind of now, which is kind of sad. But because everything was kind of cheap and free, essentially. You go to private use and rather than go to the pub or whatever it was. But the shop became a meeting place and a kind of like a melting pot, essentially, for all these people, like misfit or misshapes. It's kind of why the exhibition is called that in a funny kind of a way, because we were all the people that didn't fit in, and then we all came together and we made something happen all together. And because we had this big space and we had lots of friends who did interesting things, we had shows of all their work. This one was called Even My Penis Hates Me, by a really incredible man called Nicholas Abrahams, who you probably should check him out. And all of these people in this picture have gone on to do really interesting things, essentially. But that's kind of the heart of Tatty Devine, essentially. It's like about friendship. Ooh. And that's me and Rosie just made a ragdoll for one of our friends who used to run a knitting club and make these ragdolls they were like high fashion ragdolls, it was crazy. And she made a couple of us. So that's me and Rosie at our first ever London Fashion Week in front of the sign that we made that would twinkle in the light. And people didn't understand it. They were just like, what are you here and what are you doing and what are you selling? And we didn't care. You know, that nobody else's store looked like this then. You know, nobody else looked like this then. This was in the time of London Fashion Week when everybody was wearing cashmeres and beige. So we were a little bit off the charts and everybody just walked past us. In fact, there was one season, Joan Collins just walked past with a very power. And she just went, Rubik's Cube, and just walked off. It was really fun. It was a real moment. It was a Joan Collins moment. But Snoopy's in the pit. You know, like it's just like, we brought all the junk. There's like little Eiffel Towers and Snoopy's, and it was kind of like we tried to bring it to London Fashion Week, whether they wanted it or not, it wouldn't come in kind of thing. It was called Wish You Were Here. It was like about holidays. And segues into travel, so this picture is another, Rosie and I photographing ourselves with a real camera, because camera phones hadn't been invented. Although when they did get invented, Motorola, and we did Fashion East very first in the day, and Motorola sponsored Fashion East, and they gave us flip phones for the Fashion Week, which had a camera that clicked on so that we could take pictures to try and explain to people why you could possibly want a camera on your phone. Interesting story, maybe. So this is us going to New York, which is kind of another pivotal moment at Tatty Devine, which was also going back to East London Small Business Centre. They paid for this because in those days you could get trade mission funding to go and explore new territories. So we got a free trip to New York, basically, to go and see if we could find other stockists that might like to sell Tatty Devine in America. And it was great that they did, because we had the best time, it was really fun. And we did find stockists, and we did make a bit of a noise there. But what was more important than actually finding stockists, which nobody will ever be able to quantify why it was important and why that money from the British Fashion Council was important, was that we found this place. You know, it was just like a stepping stone in the journey. So Canal Plastics was a custom fabric cutting and engraving in the first place on Canal Street in New York, which I'm sure it doesn't look like this anymore. I'm sure it's really swanky. But at the time, it looked like this, and inside there was just loads and loads of sheets of acrylic, which we never thought of as a material essentially. But what it did have also was kind of like a candy bar section of little bits of acrylic that had already been cut out, so cats and birds and music notes and people and flowers and all kinds of like the cake decorating shop found objects. So we sweet shopped this and just bought loads of little cats and little birds and brought them back to London. I wonder if the next slide is. Brought them back to London and took brooch backs on them, which is what we did. Find objects, turn into something that you can wear. So this poodle was bought from that shop, and then we took London Fashion Week and sold it. And then we were like, oh, so now we need to buy more. How do we pay by check in dollars across the Atlantic with a fax machine? It was just like completely impossible. But we managed to, looking in the yellow pages to find out what the dialing code for America was, to work out, and then trying to work out what the time difference was, because we take Google so much for granted. But when you're sitting in a shop with just a telephone, you're just like, I don't know whether it's what time of day it is in New York right now. And trying to do fax transfers, and it was awful. But we managed to keep this little relationship up for a little while. Managed to get enough stuff over to the point where we just like, hang on, this is crazy. We need to work out how to do this ourselves. So, and that is when Edna came into our lives, essentially. So this is Edna. This is our first ever laser cutter, and all through the course of Tatty Devine, there's been risks taken. You know, when we first got the shop, it was a 5-year lease for the shop, and that was a bit scary. You know, well, it was scary for me. Rosie's like, not scary for me. She's such a risk taker. That's why we work so well together. We've got these lovely 2 different sides to us. So we signed a 5-year lease. I'm like, that's longer than I've been out of school for. How can we do that? Well, we want to do this. You just have to do it. So buying this was £7,000, which was so much money, an untold amount of money for us, you know. But we've been doing some laser cutting around the corner with an architectural model makers, and we were spending loads of money on getting that done. So again, it was all about being in East London. It was so geographically well placed. When we first started making leather goods, the leather shops were there. When we came back from New York and had these laser cut acrylic pieces, on the Bethnal Green Road there was an acrylic supplier that we've walked past 100 times. And we went in and said, can you make anything like this? And they said, no, but try Robert at Capital Models. So I went to meet Robert, who was a walk distance away as well. And he said, yes, he can make them. And then so that's when we could start to make our own things. And it was really the invention of the laser cutter for us that kind of gave us this freedom to do whatever we want. Because before that, we'd been doing whatever we wanted, but only with this restriction of what we could find, because we didn't have the capacity. And and there was no way we were ever going to be able to, even now, wouldn't be able to open open molds for mold injection, because our products are niche, I think would be the way you possibly describe them. So with laser cutting, it gave us this liberty to not worry about that. It's like, you can just make one of something, or you can make 50 of it. It doesn't make a difference. And it can be bright and shiny and colourful, and it can not break, basically, as opposed to, I was making things with cardboard or wood, and they would break. So we were spending too much money with Robert, so we thought we would have to take the plunge, and we bought our own machine. And then I had to work out how to use it, which was very interesting, because I didn't know how to use a computer. Computers then, when we first started Tatty Devine, I'm just going to check the time, because there's so many stories, I need to move it on. We're going to do questions at the end, so you can, if I'm missing something, you can ask me about it. I'll do it fast. So the first computer we had was black with green writing. Don't know what it did, but we had one. It was green, and we got it given to us by some parent type, So when this came, it needed to run from Illustrator. I made some drawings in Illustrator, and then it had to go from Illustrator to Corel Draw to make this work. So I didn't know how to use Illustrator. So one of those people in that picture from before was an illustrator, did use Illustrator. So they drew our first pieces and we communicated to them via fax message to Camberwell and back from Brick Lane about could you please draw some shapes that look like the shapes of fuzzy felt pieces? And we did it all over fax. It was quite bizarre. But then I had to sit and got a cracked copy of Illustrator and I sat at home and I just poked all the buttons until I knew how to use it because there wasn't any Illustrator tutorials or YouTube. So I gradually clunked my way around Illustrator till I could basically just about draw in Illustrator, and I had to work out how to use this machine, which was kind of scary because it's really dangerous essentially. And it's got a purifying unit, and it's just it felt like a big responsibility. But it was just another learning curve. So the whole way through Tatty Devine has just been learning curve. So it goes like this. You can just about cope. Oh my God, you learn something else. You just about cope, you learn something else. It's just been this set of steps, like up, 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 up. And you kind of get a breather, but then it's never enough to be on the straight bit. You love this bit where it's going up. So this slide is in just to kind of explain that this is the time when we first just after we got our own laser cutter, because previously to that we didn't know how to use it, we did fuzzy felt someone else. But this is our first collection, I guess, where we made this on our own laser cutter. So and some of these pieces in this collection were where the real language of Tatty Devine starts to develop. So you can see up here, that's where the lobster first appears and the trapeze first appears. So, my daughter was crocheting the other night, and I said, I could show you that, you don't have to use YouTube. What do you know about crocheting, Mum? I was like, I was on Women's Hour talking about crocheting. She looked at me like I was, I've never seen you crochet before. That's because I'm always working. So this is you'll see some of these pieces, and I talk about classic in a bit, but this was the beginning of an identity of what Tatty Devine is today, essentially. Now we do, these are much more modern now, these slides, it's much more together, because I learned how to organise photo shoots, so as well as learning how to do jewellery, and then you learn how to do wholesale, and then you learn how to run a shop, and then you learn how to have staff and open a website, then you have to learn how to do production on photo shoots and book models and creative by direct, basically. When I first started, it was just me and Rosie, and I made the jewellery and she sold the jewellery, and that's all we did. And then when our first member of staff came to work, which was 20 years ago in September, our first intern came and she was making jewellery, and I was like, it really bothered me because I didn't know what my role was anymore. I was like, she's making the jewellery, I don't know what to do, then what do I do now? And it's been that the whole 20 years, you just I do this now, and then someone else does that, and I do this now, and then, so now I get to do all the jewellery bit. It's really great. I managed to totally nail myself into the perfect spot. But so this lovely girl, we've got all these. I'll just explain how the business is set up now, which is we run a core classic collection, which has got pieces like our dinosaur necklace in, which is fundamentally Tatty Devine, essentially. We make that necklace for years, and they're if you see somebody with Tatty Devine on, it's almost becomes a way of saying, well, your necklace is Tatty Devine-ish, or it becomes, it's got a sort of a recognisable style that people will talk to each other and people will bond with each other over Tatty Devine. And I love that about it because it starts conversations. People will talk to my mum. Will give you these hundreds of stories, but my mum with Tatty Devine in the supermarket or wherever, she's always got it on, and every supermarket checkout person ever will constantly comment on her jewellery. She's like, my daughter, whatever, and she does the story and she's really loves it. But it's people, if you know someone's going to be a nice human being, basically, if they're wearing Tatty Devine. So if you're in a room with other people and they're wearing Tatty Devine, probably go talk to them. Mexican embroidery, also classic Tatty Devine. And then, so we also do seasonal. So this is where we still run with the way that fashion runs. We do a spring, summer and autumn winter collection. We do it twice a year, basically, and it's where I get complete free reign. So in our other collections, in classic, and there's another slide in a minute about contemporary, which are smaller and better priced, as it were. In seasonal, I can just do whatever. Like loads of the pieces in there, there's a table from 2012 really when this started to happen, where I can just imagine that, can an orchestra be jewellery? Yeah, I think it can. Or can a still life be jewellery? Yeah, I think it can. Or I'm really obsessed with the rites of spring. Can I make a collection about how people would throw vegetables at an orchestra because they were so offended by a piece of music? You know, just like whatever I'm feeling, I'm allowed to get it out. Like this one is about, you know, all about dreaming, because I never got to go anywhere for a year. Nobody went anywhere, and my mind is off the charts. And so my dreams are just as fun as life. So I did a collection about that. You know, just like it's a lovely, lucky, fabulous place to exist, but it's also quite nerve-wracking because you have to have this kind of profundity of ideas, and you have to put yourself in situations which are going to be inspiring, because wherever I see and wherever I go, it kind of comes out the other side as a kind of collection. So I used to make these boards. I don't make these boards anymore. I do it all, you know, on the computer, but I didn't have a computer that was big enough to hold an image that had all of these pictures on it in those days. So this was, and I would just like juxtapose things, and this collection's in there. And it was when this is like really obsessed with science fiction and fake perspective, but at the same time obsessed with Point Break and underwater. It didn't occur to me what I was doing at this time. But actually it's been quite personal, and it was a really lovely journey. Part of what the Cross Council gave Rosie and I was taking stock, which we'd never done. We never stopped running, but to take stock of this and realise that the collections have always been personal. I would never have thought this was personal, but at a time when you can't, all the places in this, people can't exist. So I was like a little bit, couldn't breathe. If you can't breathe in space and you can't be underwater, and what I was going through at the time was like a bit trapped kind of thing, which sounds a bit weird, but it was a funny time. And then this was all about like, there's lots of times it's really female-centric, a lot of our work, and like there'll be more slides about our work with the Forsyth Society and stuff like that, but I'm a massive advocate of how fabulous women are, essentially. So this collection is all about like the superpowers of women, essentially. Like there's some people doing seances, and there's Houdini's wife trying to contact Houdini after the day, and psychic geometry and Russian dolls and beautiful craft, and just how all these things feel in my mind completely connected, and all these just juxtapositions of things, and then getting them to turn them into something so that you can bring your ideas with you, basically, so that they become a thing you can wear. And then, yeah, so I did mention this briefly, but sort of challenging ideas of what jewellery subject matter can be. So this piece was it's kind of like a comment on domesticity. There's like loads of irons and stuff like that, but it's like can it still life be jewellery? It's like not normal. Most of the time jewelleries are flowers or flowers. And oh no, I do like flowers, don't get me wrong, there's always flowers in the collection, but I like the idea that we can there can be an iron on there too. That way. And then, so this is like the storytelling as well, so taking the jewellery right the way from the story to the imagery, and this actually image doesn't really explain that really well, but even though it's a lovely photograph. So this was a collection when I was really obsessed with Tudors and the 1970s, so it's like a kind of like a mash-up between the 1570s and the 1970s, because me and my friends had conversations about would it be fun if we all moved into a mock Tudor cul-de-sac and lived like actual Tudors, and threw off that window. That's not what I was meant to say. But anyway, so yeah, so all of these lovely imagery, so I had to work out how to get a team of people together, and it's really difficult when you're like at college, I couldn't have said boo to a goose, essentially, and I didn't know how to express out of my mouth what my work was about, which is kind of why you make work, essentially, isn't it? But it was quite a daunting process learning how to do this, because then all of a sudden you're in a room of 10 people and you need to explain to them what the picture needs to look like, but none of them can see inside your mind. So when I first started to work with photographers, I was really, really obsessed, and I would draw the photographs before we take them, so that they understood what I wanted them to look like. And then I even managed to work out how to actually shoot in another country. That was very, very, very nerve-wracking, because the stylist missed his flight, and so there was no clothes, so I stayed up all night Googling where you could go shopping in Rome. But he eventually turned up, it was fine. And then we would make elaborate sets, and then, but we'd also make just jewellery for fun, so we never lost that as well. So as well as like the kind of concept jewellery as well, it was really fundamental that the business existed with a kind of more comfortable level of jewellery, because now we've got staff and we have to make a certain amount of money so we can pay our staff. So you kind of have to. I've got a merchandiser now who tells me like how many pieces of £35 I should make. There's like a science to it. It's like as well as all the creativity, which I would talk about for hours and hours, it is a business as well. So I have to make sure that within a collection of 18 pieces that I do 7 times a year, that there's like 6 £35 necklaces and 125 pound necklaces and a selection of things in between. That that we're quite an ordered machine now, essentially, in a kind of group of people way. And it's a really fun way of just going, you know what, sewing machines are great. We love making things. Let's make a sewing machine necklace without it having to have me having had a vision, essentially. Because fundamentally, at the heart of Tatty Devine is all about making stuff. So all the stuff is made by hand. It's all still made by hand. I've got like a really small, tight-knit team of really skilled girls who come to us without any skills, and then we've got like a training program from level 1 to 5. Where they get trained on how to drill lollipops and drill dinosaurs, or put jump rings on, or round those things, and then gradually they get to level 5, and then they come onto my design development team, where I give them my drawings, and then they make because I don't have to make the first one anymore. I draw it and I explain it to somebody, and then they cut it and make it, and then I get it and I put it on, and then I change it, and it's like a team. I've got like a right and a left hand now. But all the girls are there hand making it in Edna, and this is some acrylic, which are gradually getting more and more recycled acrylics involved in it, and everything is recycled, all the little bits left over. This is just an example of how intricate you can laser cut, and how that if you only want to make 4 dragonflies, it's okay. So that gives us control, and basically Rosie and I are slightly control freaks, essentially. And it's if you want something to do properly, you do it yourself, essentially. So because the way we laser cut and the quality of what we do is, if you got it laser cut somewhere else, it wouldn't be the same. Like the machines are set up to such a high, they're set in a way that just makes it as perfect as humanly possible, basically. Whereas it's like lots of technical, like if you do it somewhere else, the laser will bang back up from, there's a metal grid behind it, and it will reflect up and it will chip on the back, and there's so much level of care and attention put into every piece, basically. And it's all made in small batches, and then we make things bespoke, so we make name necklaces, so maybe like 50 or so a week, bespoke name necklaces, which are all made by hand for each particular order, and people make all kinds of random words, not just names, all kinds of strange things. So, and then we have all these, like now we have got like all the like little findings. We had to get a lot of gherkins to store those, which I did, yeah. And then, so this is what happened to Brick Lane, essentially. This was actually quite a long time ago now, so you might recognise this structure. Me and my dad built that in Brick Lane, and it's not there anymore, because this is what happens when you're hoarders, and that's why all that stuff's in that room, is because you exist in this space. So our lovely space with nothing in it, our Brick Lane shop that was a gallery, turned into this, and then we had to move out because it was completely bonkers. We moved into a studio space around the corner because the shop became this big, tiny. And we just we didn't throw any of that stuff away, boxed it all up, but that's why it's in the other room next door. And that's us outside the shop, whilst it was still a gallery space. But this is a kind of like, chicks on speed, so it's kind of, this is like, we used to work with all kinds of people as well, so they kind of got us out into the world doing collaborations, and actually, okay, that's just a different story, but we opened a shop in Soho just because we fancied it. Rosie was running through Soho one night and she saw a sign to let in a very cute little shop. So we thought, yeah, we'll get a shop in Soho. So we also had 2 shops now. So then we had staff in a shop in Soho. So and Bjork used to come into this shop, and look how many ridiculous things we had in the private view. It was really fun. There was pizza being delivered every 15 minutes, shaped like hearts. And we didn't have permission to have this party, but some crazy, where's the logo of it? Courvoisier built a bar in the courtyard of this shop, and the council came around and we were like, oh my god, they're going to shut us down. They just told us to keep it down. It was like, oh god. It was really fun. But then when we moved that shop, we moved it to Seven Dials in Covent Garden. We didn't just get a moving van, we had a parade. So all of our friends came down to the old shop, we went to the old shop, we all picked up stuff, and we paraded with a marching band all the way down Old Compton Street, and then we did a few circuits of Seven Dials to the new space. And actually that banner is in the shop there. And I came dressed as the shop, made an outfit that was the shop. Because we still go back to our roots, you can't really see it sparkling, but we actually had enough money now to get a panel of that stuff made with the sequins on it. I mean, a miracle. It's just like nothing was ever kind of normal. And then look how professional this looks. It's kind of like a whole different world, isn't it? So we have done loads of collaborations and partnerships. This was actually a collaboration we did with Selfridges. This is in the Wonder Room, which was just like, we're doing what in the where, with who? And this became a whole series of pop-up concessions in all of the Selfridges eventually, which actually was detrimental to the business, but it was good and bad at the same time, very different people. But right back in the day, we collaborated with people like Chicks on Speed and with Peaches, and they were great. They were great female role models. They were really cool, and we didn't even know what marketing was. Do you know what I mean? We didn't know what networking was, but we knew that our friends were in the band and that we would quite like to make jewellery for them. So we made jewellery for them, and they would take it to New York or take it to Japan. So they had like a few little tiny bits of Tatty on a table in Japan. It was just like these kind of like tiny little beacons out in the world that just started to proliferate this message about who we were and what we stood for. And then we got to work with people like Gilbert and George. So again, for us as art students, this was off the charts basically. So we went to LA to have a meeting with a gallery there, because there was a big, massive touring exhibition of Gilbert and George at the time. And they said, why don't you do a collaboration with Gilbert and George and we could sell it at the Gilbert and George exhibition. We were like, that's a good idea. So they gave us their contact details, and we were neighbours already. They just lived down the road from us. We used to see them all the time. And in fact, there's a chair in my house that I call the story chair, which was thrown out from a cafe in Spitalfields, which they used to go to all the time, and we used to see them sitting in the chair. So it's the Gilbert and George chair. I still own it now. But we made gin necklaces for Gilbert and George, and we did a whole collection of stuff with Gilbert and George, and we still make this gin bottle now. And they gave us like great CD-ROMs essentially with all their work on it, and said, here, make whatever you want. It was great. They were so easy to work with. And then we got to work with Belle and Sebastian, which was a dream, because Rosie and I were just completely obsessed with Belle and Sebastian. So Sarah from Belle and Sebastian was like, will you make Belle and Sebastian jewellery? We were like, yes, please, we would love to make Belle and Sebastian jewellery. Everything was a dream come true, like if you told me I would be having a Skype conversation with Patricia Field, I'd be like, you want me to do what? And after watching Sex and the City, like huddled up, probably sewing those belts on in our room in Brick Lane. And then a few years later, we are talking to Patricia Field via Skype in New York about doing a pop-up event in her shop. It was just bonkers, completely bonkers. And then the V&A relaunched their shop, and they asked us to react to a piece in their collection. So we made this piece for the V&A, which was again just a total honour. We just recently worked with the V&A again on their Alice in Wonderland jewellery. And it's just such a privilege to be allowed to. And then we work with loads of people. These sizes they're quite old. Like we work with Battersea Dogs Home, we work with Louise Gray, with Ashish, with Kit Neal. Like we did loads of fashion stuff as well as art stuff. So with Jeremy Della, this was really fun. This was an exhibition Jeremy Della had in Oxford, where he was comparing Andy Warhol and William Morris together, and how their aesthetics were, how their practice was essentially kind of this, not exactly the same, but there was lots of lovely English magic about it. And then we've also been privileged enough to do bigger projects as well. So it's lovely to be invited to do, like this was a big install we did at the Royal London Hospital in the Children's Ward in the imaging and X-rays. So it was basically a spectrum that passed all the way through the imaging X-rays room. There's like 6 rooms, and we did all these different installations in all the different spaces. So it was like a wayfinding way, so that the sonography room, or whatever, actually the X-ray room was called, it was all green, so everything in there was like, all the plastic was all green, and we did all these green spectrums on the wall, and the blue room was all looked like, it kind of looked like it was underwater. It kind of made the spaces magic. And within all the things of bones, which is what the staff were interested in, they wanted to reflect the kind of idea of what we're doing here. So, but we hid things in all of the walls. So, like just up there, there's a pelvis, but then there's a bone. So, in those awkward moments when you're with children and they're a little bit scared, you don't know what to say because you're scared too. You can find the weird stuff in the wall that's not really a bone. And there was a giant dinosaur on the wall and all kinds of stuff. It was a real fun thing to do. I was up for nights, 2 weeks installing that with like my team. And then we got to do an alternative Christmas tree in Greenwich Peninsula. That was also, again, it was like, let's work with an external fabrications place and have to have structural engineers and how to get things manufactured and how to work with a budget. Again, another massive learning curve, but just all based on this necklace that we did. And then we got to work with Snoopy, because Snoopy had a lovely exhibition at the Somerset House, and Somerset House wanted us to make jewellery for the shop. And then the Snoopy people loved it so much, they said, will you do a collaboration with us directly? So that was like that was totally lovely to do something so iconic as Snoopy. And actually Snoopy was in the slide right at the beginning, I didn't even notice that, but he was on our first Fashion Week stall. So then we did some licensing. We experimented with that as a concept, part of the business model. So we worked with a company called MyPack and produced some bags. And we did some stuff with Keith Brymer-Jones. I don't know if you know him from the telly. He's got a company, and so we worked with him making that. And then we did collaborations with artists and the Design Museum and Scarlett Curtis. And then this was a fantastic project. Totally privileged to work on this. Was a project with Julian Waring, which was to celebrate 100 years of the Vogue, basically. And it was amazing to go to Parliament Square, and we got to watch the unveiling of that, and everybody that talked, everybody that read poetry. It was really moving. It was an incredible day, and everybody on the stage, except for possibly Theresa May, had Tatty Devine on, and it was just like everybody there was all wearing Tatty Devine because it was so cool. And then they made this jewellery with Crafts Council when we were launching the exhibition as part of a collaboration and a kind of push about the kind of joy of making and how important making is, basically. And like how important craft is in schools and how it is important to kind of like retrain teachers to know how to use the machinery that schools actually still have, but they don't know how to show the children how to use it. And just like how much joy it can bring, basically. And then for our 20th, which went along with this exhibition, we took some pieces from the old collections and we just pumped them up. So we made massive versions of some pieces. This was from a collection I did years and years ago, which was about roller coasters. So that's where the ARG necklace comes. So it's going, ooh, and you're going, ah. And the ARG necklace made it to classic, but ooh never did, so I made it bigger. And everything else just went bigger. And then we did this exhibition. So that's kind of bringing us up to date. I mean, there's so many other stories, but I'm really aware of time, and maybe somebody might want to ask a question. So and then I'm going to whiz through these, because this was a series of photographs that I did. This is all jewellery from different eras, which is all in the exhibition, but this is a series of photographs I took to sort of like, for the book, to kind of like, now I can take pictures, this is how I would have done it, kind of thing. This was actually in real life. This is made out of paper, and there's like 10 layers of it like that. So the perspective's real, even though in the image you can't really tell, but it really was there. And then the Jasper ware, and the pearly kings and queens, so they came from costermongers, so then we just styled it with these market traders signs. And then the swan, and then that's our book, which there might be here, I'm not sure if it's in the shop, I'm not sure, but so there's a whole book of it basically, which is just like kind of like a tomb of everything that's existed, all the weird graphic design we did. It was just like making a world basically, all the way through. And I think that is it. So I don't know if anybody would like to ask anything.
very much to Harriet. It's really been fascinating to hear the story, the journey, all the sort of cultural moments as part of it, and just to hear that you had so much fun all the time, which is amazing. So if anyone has got any questions at all for Harriet, please fire away.
Well, have you still got Edna?
Yeah, but Edna is a little bit boring. Edna's only running at 7. You have to get the laser cartridges recharged in the laser cutters. So we've got 2 machines now, like as big as Edna, and we've got another machine, Covent Garden machine in my studio as well, smaller ones. But Edna, it's hard to get parts for Edna anymore. So Edna's on a, like, I'm a bit cross about it, and I started
attached to it.
I'm attached to it. Like, it's called Edna because my brother was obsessed with the cartoon Will-O'-the-Wisp, and we thought it looked like Evil Evil. It's really called Evil Evil Edna.
Yeah, my nan's called Edna.
Yeah, so my brother's daughter is called Edna. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's like...
You moved on a lot.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, technically the machine next to it is newer and you can buy the parts for it, but it's the same. It's just an X and a Y and a Z, and it's just a vector and a set of mathematical equations essentially that it's reading. It's just a printer, but it's got a laser beam rather than ink. That's all it is. So I'm a bit like fighting corner for Edna, and everyone's like, we can't put... I'm like, I don't need a new one, surely just get it recharged. But we're going to get a new one recharged, and then we will get a new one to replace it, and then I will have her as a coffee table. Oh, I'm not going to remember, I really can't do that. Don't do that, Harriet, mental note yourself.
On the front Carla head,
Yeah,
where you've got putting the 3D bit on,
yeah.
what comes first? Putting the imagery on, the photographic thing phase.
Yeah.
Does that come before or after the laser?
So
that's another process.
So it's not a process. So it's like you get a photograph. In that particular case, it'd be a photograph, and then you have to like basically desaturate it, and then you play around with the contrast until it gets to a point where it would laser cut. That one's laser cut into leather, which is why it goes darker like that. And then you etch it into the leather, and the laser cut out the leather too. Although we don't do very much with leather anymore.
So the thread is leather, not
yeah.
That's what I.
So she's leather, and then the bits get stuck on afterwards. So when it cuts out, it will leave little circles where you stick those bits.
I just thought it had different qualities.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, did you ever take time out? So it sounds like you were...
Yeah, no, not really. I did have a baby, which was it was, a thing that happened, which obviously took me out for a few weeks. But I had a baby in July, and then by October it was really like, Harry, can you come back to work? So I did. Luckily, at the time, my partner stayed at home and looked after the baby and used to bring her to work. And I would feed her and then put her back to bed. She'd go to sleep in the mornings. And then she'd go to like a baby singing group, and then he would bring her to me and I would feed her, and then I would go home and do it all again, and then stay up all night and do it all again. I went mad during that period of time. But yeah, no time out. I can't remember last time I went on holiday for 2 weeks. It's just no. But it's like, even if I go on holiday, not a holiday, like, I will take myself to places on purpose to see cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like everything I do. Like, there's no like them and us. There's no like at work and not at work. Although I do try. That isn't totally true anymore. But there never used to be any time that wasn't this. It's just like everything. It is just who I am. It's just.
How did you manage to protect your brand from, foreign imitation?
Well, you can't, essentially. I mean, we have got it trademarked, and it's a registered trademark, which we just have to renew just recently, but that doesn't really mean, what does that mean anyway? I'm sure a lot of them can tell me what it means, but at the end of the day, people are going to do it, and there was quite a big case, quite a lot of years ago now, where Claire's Accessories did quite a few pieces, all at once. And I found a dinosaur necklace in one shop when I was trying to buy my daughter rainbow leg warmers. I was like, oh, I'm in here, but what is that? It was like, and then I was trying to get a new passport, and I was in the Claire's in Victoria, so I was going to see if they're selling it too. And then I found a banana, a glasses, a moustache, something else, and I can't remember what. I mean everything. So we just did a blog about it, and we did have the text of the blog checked by a solicitor to make sure we weren't counter-libeling them. But it basically said, "What do you think?" And Twitter was massively brand new then, so we just put a link on it on Twitter to the blog, and just put it out there. So, and it literally went off. I didn't do any work for a week because I just watched Twitter just go off. And it was like having an army of people who were just tearing Claire's apart on our behalf. It wasn't just people that loved Tatty Devine, it was all the whole design community, it was every PR agency were watching it because Claire just didn't know how to deal with it, basically. Because there were people posting on Claire's Facebook group, and Claire was deleting comments because nobody knew how to handle a community at that time, because there wasn't community managers. Just wasn't a thing. And then that was really enraging people. So people were posting on their Facebook and then screen grabbing it, and then posting the screen grab on Twitter to prove that Claire's had taken it down. And then because of this huge storm, and we literally had a piece in every major newspaper. And it was like professional people watching out how IP was going to perform in the future, basically. Yeah. What difference did it make? And it was kind of incredible. It was massive exposure. It was the dinosaur necklace, that's why it's so famous. And we went on Watchdog, which was mad for telly. Yeah, it was mad. But people do it all the time. The thing is now, it's difficult, isn't it? Because we are 20 years old and we have made a language. And I think people who aren't aware of what I've just talked about, or it's really easy to do, isn't it? If you don't make yourself aware and don't understand cultural references, you can accidentally stumble into something at the wrong point of knowledge and replicate it without understanding it. Because I think there's a million ways and a million things you could do with laser cut acrylic. You don't have to do it exactly like I did. There's a million ways to draw a dog on wheels, thousands of them. I can make 50, but you don't need to make one that's like that. So it's like everybody come forth, laser cut into the world, but it's all about originality, isn't it? It's about original design. It's about juxtaposing ideas and trying to create something new. And it's really hard because there's so many things that have existed. And I'm sure that even my referencing is coming from the 70s or something from the 1970s or the 1570s. Like, when is that okay? I've just drawn a Tudor house, but I wasn't the architect of that Tudor house. It's like there's a fine line, and there's about making something your own and trying to move it from one cultural field into another cultural field to give it like a new and breathe something of your own into it, essentially. And that's what I would recommend to all young people who make anything. It's like make something original that you love. Cool.
Anybody else with any questions at all before we wrap up?
Maybe it would be nice, maybe there's some aspiring jewellery designers in the room. What advice would you give to aspiring jewellery designers just starting out?
Jewellery is it's like it depends what kind of jewellery, it's really different. I didn't know anything about jewellery when I started, and the students that would come to us on work experience from Middlesex, who got quite an established jewellery course, their tutors would be like, don't go to them, they're not real jewellers. They won't learn anything from them, which I hope that they wouldn't say now. I don't think they would. I think you have to make it your own, don't you? I think it's about personality, and if you have to love what you do, and it's like you kind of have to be proud of what you do. And I think you have to make it original, and I think you need to just bring yourself to it. Whatever you're really into, that's the thing you should make. And you should. We made jewellery because we couldn't find anything we liked. It was like there was nothing in the shops we could either A, afford, or B, would want to wear. So it was like born out of necessity almost. But I never not look forward to Monday morning, so that's really good.
Anybody else at all? Okay. Thank you very much, Harriet. That was absolutely fascinating. I'm sure everybody would agree. Another round of applause. just a reminder that the exhibition is running till the 13th of November, so yeah, 10 till 4, Monday to Saturday. Please do come along again if you want to and bring more people with you. And you're running a jewellery workshop tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing that, but I'll be about in space tomorrow.
Yeah, so there are still some spaces left. It's 11 till 12 in Gallery 1. It's make a bunting necklace. So, and you'll be able to take that away with you as well. So you are welcome to book on with us tomorrow morning if you want to come in. If anybody does want to come, there are some spaces left. So yeah, it should be good. And I think that's it really. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. If anybody is hungry still, curry on the go and just desserts are still open. Just meant to say that they're open for another sort of half an hour or so. So yeah, you're welcome to hang about a bit longer if you do want to. Thank you very much and travel home safe. Cheers.